Welcome to the inaugural episode of the K-State Regen Ag Pod, where we talk all things regenerative agriculture here at Kansas State University, across the state of Kansas and beyond. I'm Nick Detter, your host, and I'm honored to be joined today by K-State's own Dr. Chuck Rice, University Distinguished Professor of Soil Microbiology and one of the leading researchers on regenerative agriculture internationally. Dr. Rice, thank you for joining me today.
Thanks, Nick.
Well, I think just to start us off, tell us a little bit about your background, how you got into your current roles at K-State, and you know what you're doing now specifically for the university.
Yeah, so I don't know how far back you want to go, but maybe a little bit of history is important. So I'm a first-generation college student back then in the 70s. And then, so I started out, I went to Northern Illinois University for my bachelor's degree, but I started out in biology, but I switched to geography, physical geography, which was basically water and soils. And that was a critical, I think, development in my career because it gave me, in a geography degree, you give a bigger picture on how systems work. And so I concentrated on water and soils. And then I went to University of Kentucky for my master's and PhD. My master's was in surface mine reclamation. And then my PhD was in nitrogen cycling, soil microbiology, but nitrogen cycling in no-till soils. From there, I had a stint up at Michigan State University, worked with one of the most renowned soil microbiologists, Jim Teege, which really helped form my thinking and advance my skill set, and then came to K-State in 1988. I was actually the first soil microbiologist in agronomy in 1988. So, it was really critical when I first arrived here at K-State. We have the Kanza Prairie Biological Station. It's the largest area of tallgrass prairie devoted to research. And so not only did I work in agriculture, cropping systems, but part of my effort was learning about the prairie. And that was really critical as my career advanced and we got into regenerative agriculture, is that if you think about the prairie, it's undisturbed, so no-till. It's extremely nutrient efficient. There's no nutrients applied to that system, yet it's very productive. It has an extensive root system. It's climate resilient, and it's biologically it's a diverse system. So I have been working on no-till systems since my PhD, and so learning of the prairie and then designing systems, cropping systems, to be those characteristics of the prairie are important. So I had a first project here at K-State, got a grant to look at nitrogen leaching in no-till and tilled systems. That was supposed to be a 3-year project, and now 36 years later, we're still continuing that experiment. So it was set up to be looking at synthetic fertilizer, nitrogen fertilizer, urea now, and compost as a nitrogen source. And so we've been keeping those systems in place, and we're finding some unique characteristics from that project. And we could talk a little bit more about that. But that led to understanding nitrogen cycling, but carbon cycling in soils and the potential for soils to sequester carbon.
Yeah, so you've a lot of work over time, and I really appreciate the story, like you said, of the history of how your different experiences kind of developed your thinking about this as a system. And that's one of the things we really like to talk about is regenerative agriculture as a system. So my next question is, could you talk a little bit more about specifically how your research over time has evolved? How you mentioned those long-term no-till plots, but I just think in the whole ag community we've seen this development of, I think no-till was one of the really foundational things, but then we moved into conversations around soil health, and then now it feels like this conversation about regenerative agriculture systems is kind of the primary point of conversation. So how has your research kind of tracked and maybe even influenced that development of that conversation over time?
Sure. So being a soil microbiologist, you're looking at the microbes in the soil and soil health, soil life in the soil. And then and those microbes are drivers for nutrient cycling, carbon cycling in soil. So that was underpinning for that. We've done some work with bioinoculants, which is actually a component of regenerative agriculture in some respects. So I've always been kind of doing that work, but again, thinking about that cropping rotation as a system rather than as a single-year crop or a single-year process. So we've been, well, back in the 90s, soil quality was the big thing, and that kind of died down a little bit. I was one of the Midwest, I guess, leaders in that area. John Duran, some others were instrumental. But then in the mid to late 2000s, then soil health became resurrected from soil quality to soil health. And so I've been doing all that, because if you look at this long-term experiment, for example, you're looking at nutrient cycling, nitrogen cycling, and carbon, but it's also maintained or sustained by the life in the soil. And soil health is a concept that really integrates not only the physical and chemical properties, and that's what probably soil quality was more focused on, and then the realization that biology is really important. In some cases, it's the driver for much of the functions in soil. So we've been working on integrating soil biological measurements into the soil health concept and documenting and tracking those changes. What happened then about 10 years ago, that there was the Soil Health Partnership that was started in the Midwest, mostly the I-states, right, the corn region. And then we were asked, Kansas Corn Commission actually said, hey, we got a lot of corn here, we should be joining that partnership. So they actually started the funding for the Kansas Soil Health Network. And we started out with 4 sites, and that's now expanded to 7 sites right now. Hopefully we can add a few more. But the original 4 sites have been in place now for 8 years. So the nice thing is that we have a long-term data set. So let me explain the network, the concept.
Absolutely. So
this is on-farm research trial. So it's with real farms, working farms. And so the principle of that, or the objective of that program, was to document a change in practice that would improve soil health. So our farmers that we enrolled, so this was negotiated. These were large strips. Generally, they're 2.5 acre replicated strips. So with 4 replicates with 2 treatments, you're talking anywhere from 20 acres or even larger, depending on the field. So the farmers, what we asked them to do was maintain their current practice, and then some practice that we think would benefit soil health, and that was negotiated between K-State and the farmers. So it turned out the original 4 farmers were all doing no-till, some for many years, 20 years or even more. So what they did was, at least the 3 farmers that were in that original group, we negotiated, and they did the implementation of cover crops. Back in this long-term experiment 35 years ago, cover crops weren't in vogue, right? And so now there's an interest in increasing the coverage of the soil with plant material. And so the addition of cover crops in between the cash crops is an important soil health improving practice. So now we have like I said, 7 farms. And so all of them, there's some differences, but no-till, cover crops. In one case, they're adding organic amendments in that. One farmer right now, probably a second one, will start implementing animals grazing into their cropping systems with the cover crops. So it's the nice thing is that we have now this database that's in some cases up to 8 or over 8 years. What was gratifying to me was this program was only supposed to be 5 years. And when we met after the 5th year, presented the results, I'll talk a little bit about that, but all of them wanted to keep it going. There was a couple of people that struggled. They were having a hard time with the cover crops and the impact on the cash crop, but they all wanted to keep it going. That, to me, that meant that we were doing something of value to them if they were willing to put up with us in this project. So anyway, yeah, so we have this network. What we found, generally after 3, but certainly by 5 years, that with the addition of cover crops that we have improved soil health and the metrics for soil health, right? So what we're focusing on is the standard soil fertility chemical test, pH, nutrients. But what I focus on is what I call the holy trinity of soil health, and that's organic matter or soil carbon. And that's important because the organic matter holds nutrients, provides that for plant growth, but carbon is the food source for the microbes. So if we improve carbon, we should improve microbial activity. And so then the other aspects of that holy trinity then are soil microbial measurements, and we're using what we call phospholipid fatty acid, but it's looking at the soil composition, the microbial composition. So fungi, bacteria, different types of fungi, actinomycetes. So we're looking at the composition of that microbial community. We're also using enzymes, which is an indicator of activity. And then the third part of the Holy Trinity is soil structure. And so if you look at that 3-part relationship, we know that if you improve soil structure, that means water can infiltrate into the soil at a higher rate. You can get air movement in and out of the soil. We know that microbes, particularly fungi, help build soil structure, those aggregates. And then, of course, the microbes are feeding off the carbon. And inside those aggregates, soil particles, carbon is trapped in those aggregates. So now there's that. That's why the Trinity, it's this 3-way relationship that's really key. And so we're using that as our metrics. Well, it turned out that in all cases, after 5 years, there was a tendency after 3 years, but it was significant after 5 years that we're getting more soil carbon, we're getting more microbial diversity, particularly we're adding fungi, and we're building soil structure aggregates. And so that shows that 3-part relationship. So that was exciting, and like I said, we've added 3 more sites to that network. So what happened was then that network provided a base for, we've had field days, we've now have data that we can go to companies or organizations that are interested in ecosystem service markets, carbon credits as an example. But then we can say, hey, we got a network across the state that's not just a research site at K-State, that we got these real farms and distributed across the state.
Yeah, that's very exciting results. And you talk about that positive feedback cycle of how, those different metrics seem to kind of feed into each other and build up the soil health over time. So, that's soil health, and I think it's so crucial and so important and foundational to all this work. How did the concept and the research around soil health kind of develop into this broader regenerative agriculture initiative now that K-State is pursuing? And what is that initiative, and what are the goals of that initiative?
Yeah. So if you look at the original idea of regenerative ag, it was really based on improving the soil.
Yes.
That was the starting point. And so, again, the soil health that I've been doing, or our labs have been doing for years, and now the network feeds into the regenerative ag concept. And so there's different views on what regenerative ag is. There's extremes, but I take the view, again, going back to my early work on the prairie, is regenerative ag. It starts with the soil, but if you want to be nutrient efficient, climate resilient, water resilient, and diverse, then the soil health is one of the underpinnings. So the principles of regenerative ag are, one, minimal disturbance. Again, going back to the prairie, but we know that tillage disrupts the microbial community. It disrupts that soil structure. And so minimum till, no till being the prime example, is the starting point. I think that's almost mandatory. Once you get there, then you can implement the other principles. And some overlap. So one principle is keeping the soil covered. Well, residue, no-till, and residue management is one way to do that. Also, cover crops adds more residue to that surface, keeps it covered for soil and water erosion. And then, again, looking at the prairie and my previous work in ag systems is that it's adding more diversity in that crop rotation. So, instead of monoculture corn or soybeans, or even corn soybean, I would question how much of a diverse system that is, but now I'll start adding in other cash crops. Wheat is a prime example. We've had a study that the wheat is really important. It's important grain, but also there's characteristics of having wheat in that system adds a lot more diversity. So one of the farmers that we work out in West says that he's a residue farmer, a moisture farmer, and wheat's really critical out west, in western Kansas, to retain that soil moisture in that. So wheat's an important part of that rotation. And then the last principle is the integration of livestock. And that can be grazing of those cover crops. It could be grazing some of the residue from the cash crops. But it does a couple different things. It adds nutrient cycling. It can improve weed management, but also provides another source of income. Whether you hay it or graze it, if you graze it, then you got nutrient cycling, and the manure is returned and nutrients associated with that. It's not, I guess I don't think of it as being mandatory, but if you can do it, you're better off in having that integration of livestock. And then the last principle is put all these things in context. So the soils are going to be different, the weather, climate's going to be different across a state or even a country. And so then, and the producer, he or she is going to have different skill sets. Are they willing to take risk? Are they financially, can they invest or are stable? And so that's a key component in designing a regenerative system. It's not a cookie cutter approach. It's really looking at the system and then trying to adapt that to the soils and the weather and the producer needs.
Yeah, it's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Right.
So when looking at that as the university, what do you think some of the university's goals are with being leaders in this promoting regenerative agriculture systems?
So I guess it was 2.5 years ago. There was internal competition for new initiatives at K-State, and so there's a couple different things happening, but so the regenerative ag, if you want to say movement, but was gaining more and more traction. We had a gap here at K-State. My work, I've had 3 5-year grants looking at systems. One focused on water, one on rain-fed wheat, and one on grazing systems. And systems is the key there. So again, as my career and opportunities progressed, the regenerative ag seemed like an opportunity, moving from my own research to the Soil Health Network and scaling up. And so we put in a proposal. We did get some seed money to start it. And one of the aspects of the initiative, the K-State competition, was to look for public-private partnerships, integration. And in particular, in the last 5 years, maybe a little bit longer, but now there are consumer companies interested in regenerative agriculture. So the PepsiCos, the King Arthurs, General Mills, you can go on down the line. And so this seemed like a perfect opportunity. The stars were aligning. And so then that's where we started, put in the proposal, and we got the initiative.
What are some of the components of that initiative that you hope to see play out going forward?
So, so the thing here is that, again, it's a systems approach. And so I'll come back to that. But also now we're integrating with private entities. And so we have to engage with those companies, entities, and find out what their needs are and where we can provide some synergies. So where that's come into play is now we say, okay, we got 8 years of experience on the Soil Health Network. We can demonstrate some of these practices. That provides training opportunities, field days for that regenerative ag concept. And so now I've gone to several meetings that includes companies on regenerative ag, and we've started talking to them. So there's a lot of interest that we aren't starting from ground zero. We already have, well, in some cases, 30 plus years of experience, but certainly on the 8 years on the Soil Health Network. And so companies are saying, hey, we can take advantage of this. So now we have King Arthur Baking Company funding some outreach efforts that you're part of.
This podcast.
This podcast. But we got other companies that were also doing some international work on a integrated crop livestock farm in Brazil. We've been approaching other companies as well for Kansas and the Great Plains. So like I said, the stars were aligning. It's a perfect storm in a good way, and so that's where we are headed in the initiative. Because it's systems oriented, it has to be transdisciplinary. Okay, and that was part of my experience. But I guess I'm proud to say that we've formed a good team, a diverse team. So we got the traditional agronomy expertise in there, but we have ag economics. We have life cycle assessment in biological ag engineering. We have a sociologist, Matt Sanderson, who we've been working on several projects together in the past. But then, animal science as well. And then now, two new areas that we added were human nutrition, because there's a lot of questions and interest in the connection between soil health, grain quality, and then human health. And so that, I knew it was there, but it seems like it's picked up interest. So I wish I could say I was smart enough to project the future, but it was aligning. And then I added marketing. And that was really critical, because if we're dealing with the PepsiCos and the King Arthurs, I know agriculture, right? But I don't know marketing. And so having that marketing person, Esther Sweely, was really critical, because she could talk the language of those companies involved in marketing. So that's the team where probably need to add some additional expertise as needed, but that's the core group. And the initiative, a K-State initiative, provided a setup of the Regenerative Ag Innovation Farm as part of the agronomy department north of campus. So that now has 100 acres devoted to innovation in regenerative ag.
Yeah, I think that is a good little preview for our audience. Some of those people you mentioned on that teams will be some of our next episodes coming out. So they'll get a little bit of a flavor of how, we look at this question of regenerative agriculture from all these different disciplines. Could you speak a little bit more to the Regenerative Agriculture Innovation Farm, kind of what's its purpose, what's your hopes for it going forward, a little bit of what it's going to look like and the role it'll play in this effort?
Yeah. So the key component is, the key component is that this is it's 100 acres, but it's divided up into 4 different phases of regenerative ag. So they're 20-acre or so fields, and that's important. It's fields. Generally, research plots are 20 feet by 40 feet, right? So they're great for testing a certain concept or practice, but it's not a systems approach. And so we will still have the small plots, but this innovation farm now provides us at field scale, not the scale of a farm, but 20 acres. What that means is now we can look at as a systems approach. We're going to instrument the heck out of it. We already have water sensors, flux towers to measure solar energy and gas fluxes coming off the fields. And then because they're 20 acres, we can integrate livestock. You can't integrate livestock on a 20 by 40 foot plot. So now we have different phases. So we have kind of the base rotation, no-till, corn, wheat, soybean rotation. But then the next phase will be the introduction of cover crops. And then the third phase will be the grazing of those cover crops. And then the fourth phase is a little bit, learning from one of our producers, Justin Knopf, near Salina, Kansas. What he does is he has a longer grazing phase. So after wheat harvest, he has a summer crop grazing mix, a winter cover crop grazing mix, and then back into cash crops. And he grazes those. And so that's the animal integration. So our fourth phase will be kind of that
pushing the intensity.
Yeah. So, the principles, it's, when I talk about it, it's really intensity and diversity of the cropping system of that field. And so that's where we're pushing. Instead of monoculture or even a corn soybean rotation, now it's trying to push the system. And that's my experience in Brazil is, of course, they don't have this thing called winter, but they can really push the system and have 3 or 4 crops, and one of those crops is livestock, into that system, and they're finding out that it's more profitable It's more efficient. And so we're taking those principles, bring them into Kansas. That's what kind of Justin is doing.
Yeah. Well, it just seems like there's so much energy around regenerative agriculture and collaboration here at the university. So I have to ask a little bit of a trickier question before I let you go. What are some of the obstacles you see that we need to overcome, if we're really going to go from the energy, that we see now to seeing like transformation across the entire ag landscape on this topic?
So, well, there's a couple different obstacles. One is internal. When you develop a transdisciplinary team, a systems approach, it's getting all the pieces of the puzzle put together and working together efficiently. So that's a little bit of a management obstacle, I guess, and keeping everybody happy. But I guess the other obstacle is just like any agriculture system, it's trying to make change, right? And so getting producers to think differently. This is not easy. It takes a different mindset. It takes different skills. What we found is that the system is changing. This is a biological system, and it's going to evolve and change. So you can't say, okay, I start this route, practices, set of systems, and that's going to be, I don't have to make changes. Well, the producers I've worked with and what we're seeing on this long-term experiment, that it's constantly changing, but certainly every 5 years or so, you're going to have to make some changes in your approach. And so it's a living, it's biology, right? And it's a living system, and you're going to have to evolve with it. So that's an obstacle, I guess, is the different skill sets, but it's changing all the time. There's going to be new problems. The nice thing is that now we have consumer companies interested in regenerative agriculture, so they can also be drivers for that change. Instead of just the producer, the farmer, the industry can help incentivize and drive those systematic changes. And so now the other thing is gets consumers now interested or knowledgeable about ag, but they can help incentivize that change. And so while it's hard, we got some other external factors that can help support that change.
Yeah. So, that was a positive note, and we like to end with a positive note on our show. So could you tell us, we've talked about a lot of different things today. What has you most excited? Where do you really see, 5 years from now, when you look back, what do you think you'll be like, yeah, I'm really proud that we did this, and I think that this is really where the future's going heading forward?
I'm excited in that hopefully I can leave this as part of my legacy, but this could transform agriculture.
Absolutely.
And in a positive way. And I think if we can get this and get it right and keep tweaking it, but I truly believe this could change the rural economy, could, make agriculture part of the circular bioeconomy. We didn't talk about that, but the idea is that you want to be efficient, recycle, reuse. This is part of that, and that's another concept that's being taken up globally as well. But I really think this will be transformative for agriculture.
Well, on that note, thank you everybody so much for listening. I think we'll have plenty of conversations going forward. Just like these are evolving systems that are evolving conversations. So we'll look forward to having you on again in the future, Dr. Rice. And thank you everyone for joining us for the first episode of the K-State Regenerative Agriculture Podcast.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Oh, give me a home where the buffalo roam, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day. Home, home on the range, where the deer and the antelope play, where seldom is heard a discouraging word, and the skies are not cloudy all day.